China is prioritizing innovation-driven development as a result of strong government investment detailed in its 2016 five-year plan. In this segment, Todd and I explore how China is becoming a fast follower and the importance of exercising our dominance to ensure a level playing field, especially in the area of intellectual property.
Another theme that's emerged over the last probably decade or decade and a half is China and kind of its role in the global biotech universe. And I believe, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, I did some research on this probably like 8 or 9 years ago, but I think they were going to allocate something, the country was going to allocate 4% of their GDP to either technology itself or life sciences technology. And that's a huge amount of money, right? They have many, many universities. They have, a lot of clinical trial sites, a large population. So it's very, I'm not sure if easy is the right word, but they have all the resources that are necessary to run a lot of clinical trials and do a lot of research. And I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe there's some suspect about the quality of that research, but it seems to have improved. And I've had some discussions with other executives, and they have spoken to me about a trend that they're noticing where in China, there is this fast follower approach where if there's a new molecule that was perhaps innovated in the United States or in Europe or something, that, if it shows some early promise, they'll jump onto it and do a whole bunch of derivatives of that, trying to find, a follow-on molecule that is either as good or is better. And what's happened is there's been a lot of M&A. I won't go into all of the examples of that, but there's been a lot of M&A where Western companies have tried to jump into a certain area by buying a Chinese asset that's been developed like that. And it's an interesting thing. I kind of wonder how that'll evolve and how it will change the environment in the space. But would love to hear your thoughts, from your perch as a CEO of a company that is looking at a broad variety of investments. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think China wants to be competitive in this arena, and we've seen this before. I mean, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, China. We innovated and started the semiconductor industry.
Right here in Texas, actually, just down the street.
That's right, Texas
Texas Instruments.
Yeah, was a key early innovator, and we basically outsourced the manufacturing ourselves to. This is a theme of the current administration, and they're spot on. We outsourced all the manufacturing for cheaper labor to Taiwan, Japan, etc. And innovation happens close to manufacturing. That's really true. I don't know if it's as true in the biotech industry, but it's certainly true in general. Plus, we kind of need the manufacturing jobs. Not everybody is going to learn to code, as they say, right? We need those types. So China has a very directed strategic effort. We're not so coordinated in a democracy. There's different opinions.
Right. Yeah.
Which
has its pluses and minuses, we should say.
Yeah, we don't.
There's good and bad with being directed, I guess. Right.
We're not as good at the long-term strategic, direction and holding it, which is a problem. But I really like the current direction we're talking about, and we have to use our market power here, because China is innovating pretty rapidly. It is true they have been using kind of mostly fast follower development strategies, but their universities innovation is growing rapidly. And that's part of the cycle of innovation that you go through. First fast following, then they're going to start doing really innovative stuff. And so it's competitive. But right now, if you look at kind of the global consumption of innovative therapeutics, we're a $250 billion market. They're 15. So all these other countries that are doing it need access to our market, and our leaders need to use that market power to make sure we've got balanced trade and fair competition. We didn't really do that very well historically, in my view. We haven't done that very well. And we really need to use our market power to do that. So that's cutting deals with other countries. We need to be good at that. And they're going to want access. We've got a lot of cooperation kind of ongoing already between our VC firm. Many VC firms have co-invested with new Chinese molecules, right? Because there's a lot of fast follower molecules that look promising coming out of China. And I think Orbimed's done like 6 deals. NEA's done a couple. Some of our blue chip firms, Bain Capital, some of our real blue chip firms have started to do that with NewCo formation around Chinese molecules. And that's good for us, I think. A lot of that innovation will happen here. A lot of the clinical development will happen here. But we need to really make sure that we use our market power to enforce fair trade. And as a really an intellectual property strategy, which is what we are investing in teams and assets, but it's all underpinned by intellectual property. That's where there's a big gap. And China has historically, I think, kind of tried to take the shortcuts on the IP side. Right, and we have been hesitant.
Yeah, the whole forced technology transfer, which has been a huge problem in the biotech space.
Yeah. So we need to use our market power to help them fix that. I mean, the Chinese investors will eventually want a robust IP system as well. The Chinese innovators will benefit.
Right. Yeah. After they innovate and kind of catch up, then they're kind of in a bad position if they don't have the same protections that we have in the United States.
Exactly. So, mutual interest will eventually align. We need to use the relative market power now to make sure that happens to our benefit, obviously. So, that's what I think, at the highest levels, we need to focus on. But I think we're doing all the things right at the industry level. We're engaged with China. There's lots of co-investment around Chinese molecules that will be good for American patients in the future at some point. But we do need to kind of fix our mutual IP systems. As a royalty investor, I think most of the royalty funds out there are very reticent to invest in royalties that are underpinned or your return relies upon the IP system outside of Western law.
Yeah.
We do deals mostly in arenas of Western law. Europe, the US, Australia, Japan's good. That's where we will can rely upon our returns. And so that's a really important underpinning that we need to solve some problems in. And now's the time to do it because we are still the big consumers